welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Garrott Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2003 period piece drama, British drama, titled Bright Young Things. Now, Bright Young Things runs for 1 hour and 46 minutes long. It is directed by Stephen Fry. It is produced by Gina Carter and Miranda Davis. It is also written by Stephen Fry, and it is based on the novel Vile Bodies by Evelyn Wag. The score was done by Anne Dudley, the cinematography by Henry Braham, and it was edited by Alex Mackey. And the stars in this movie are Emily Mortimer as Nina Blount, Stephen Campbell-Moore as Adam Fenwick Sims, Fenella Woolgar as Agatha Runcible, Michael Sheen, he is Miles. Let's see, we also have James McAvoy as Simon Balcairn, who also goes by the alter ego Mr. Chatterbox. We have Dan Ackroyd as Lord Monomark. We have Jim Broadbent as the Major, Stockard Channing as Mrs. Melrose Ape, David Tennant as Ginger Littlejohn, and we also got Peter O'Toole, and he is Colonel Blount. So what did I think of this movie? I've got to admit that Bright Young Things truly was a great period piece drama. Okay, so it's situated between the two world wars, just a little bit before the Great Depression. This is back in the roaring 20s. This was during the time when everybody was throwing these wild, extravagant parties, particularly the upper class, and everybody was practically on cloud nine. This is long before this whole Great Depression thing started to take place. So this definitely tells the story of a rowdy group of bohemians by nature that consists of poets, musicians, actors who are just bored out of their upper class echelon, and they decide to find ways to fulfill their wasted lives by partying, drinking, and other assorted ways to keep themselves entertained in order to search for the meaning of life. Now, just because underneath all those wild and crazy partying days, do you actually think that there's actual happiness inside of these young idealists? And I'm going to tell you right now, the answer is no. All the riches in the world, all the parties, all the masquerades, they really just can't find any kind of happiness within them. They're all very flawed individuals. Yes, we could say that the human race as a whole, we're all flawed. But these guys really do have serious issues, in spite of the fact that they're rich and they can be able to throw these extravagant parties. But deep down inside, they're actually a very sad crowd. Bright Young Things depicts the ideology of went through the minds of these young people who grew up in the 20s and 30s that included household names at the time like Ernest Hemingway, Gertrude Stein, and Oscar Wilde. These people were well cultured and extraordinary geniuses, but due to their controversial ways, their fate ended in tragic proportions. Not just World War II, which was coming the way, and the stock market crashed, and the Great Depression, but other events led to these characters' fate. This is not exactly what you call a happy-go-lucky movie, in spite of all the wild parties and the extravagance. The main story was about a young man named Adam Fenwick Sims, played by Stephen Campbell-Moore. He's about to get his newest novel, Bright Young Things, published from some newspaper magnate named Lord Monomark, played by Dan Ackroyd. But unfortunately, at the airport checkout, the customs officials, they deemed that his novel is too racy, so they end up having his novel confiscated from him, and he's trying to do everything he can to get his book back. In the meantime, he's doing these small menial jobs. He's going as far as to do some hustling, some gambling, in order to make as much money, not for his own purpose, but so that he can get enough for his marriage to his fiancée, Nina Blount, played by Emily Mortimer. He's betting, he's doing horse racing, he's doing all kinds of hustling, some kind of card trick games, anything for some cash. And he needs it fast. Otherwise, there's not going to be a wedding. He also wants him and Nina to live a financial, fruitful life, even if it means to get out of the busy city and to escape from these bright young things, which are definitely filled with some kooky but very colorful characters. This is a real character-driven film, and as soon as I'm finished, I'll probably go through some of the characters that I think you'll probably find very interesting. So, based on the novel Vile Bodies by Evelyn Wagg, actor-director Stephen Fry resurrects this rather untouched decade with a no-nonsense, relaxed manner as we explore these posh, upper-class socialites we like to call bright young things. With a fast-paced and refined characters, the characters portrayed here definitely are spineless and degenerative. They actually go against the societal norms of the 1920s, and in the end, it backfires on them pretty badly. With disaster drawing upon them, the London tabloids are chewing up their reputation. In fact, they even have their own newsprint based off of these young idealists. They're getting more and more mass attention than the royal family. They're getting more and more successful in their publications than the London Times and the News of the World. That's just how extremely popular they are. They even usurp the royal family in terms of media attention. These guys definitely don't care about current political events. Money to them grows on trees, and they lived their lives like it was their last day on earth for them, which might as well be taken into literal terms, because World War II is coming up, and the Great Depression is also going to be coming upon them. So all their richness and all their glory is going to soon be taken away from them, and they're going to end up eventually living in squalor. But right now, they're just living the life, only to realize that in a few years' time, their living the life will soon become their ultimate fate. Stephen Fry definitely has wowed his fans with his impressive resume of outstanding performances over the years. And even though his acting here is, albeit a very small role, not very high prolific, his directing is another reason to respect this man. The cast that's compiled here are a definitive ensemble of well-known performers juxtaposed with a cast of then newcomers. Yeah, we have the old veterans here like Jim Broadbent, Julia McKenzie, and Peter O'Toole, and a final goodbye for Lord John Mills. And then we have relative newbies at the time, like Emily Mortimer, Stephen Campbell-Moore, and James McAvoy. They're definitely entertain us with their professional prowess. And then we also have some people from North American soil, like Dan Ackroyd and Stockard Channing, to show that they can turn in brilliant performances without sounding cliched. Stephen Fry definitely loosely lets them strut their acting chops until some of them just fizzle out in their own demise. And though the movie Chicago paints a grim depiction of the Roaring Twenties, Bright Young Things goes the extra mile in all its reckless ways. Yes, the grim picture is seen in Chicago, but the reckless negligence of these young idealists comes to life here. And I think it's actually maybe told in a more effective but somehow low prolific way than Chicago. Of course, Chicago was a musical. This is more like a period piece sort of costume drama thing. But it's still very, very effective in its delivery. With incredible settings, accurate costuming, and luscious scenery, this movie definitely captivates a prelude to time period before World War II. I would truly, definitely, highly recommend you watch this movie. You'll definitely be enlightened by the superb acting, the authentic costumes, and Stephen Fry's masterful direction. It will definitely leave you mesmerized. So all that's said and done, like I mentioned before, this is a character-driven movie. And, they're really, really well dimensioned. So I'm going to sort of go through some of the names for you. Emily Mortimer, she is Nina Blount. She is a charming, sweet young lady. A little bit on the terms of long suffering because, her fiance is struggling to try to make as much money possible to have a wedding and maybe even possibly to have them live a much more comforting, carefree lifestyle. She seems like a very level-headed, understanding individual, and maybe of all the wild, bizarre, kooky characters, she's probably maybe the most sane and maybe the most level-headed character in this entire movie. Stephen Campbell-Moore plays Adam Fenwick Davis, a young, aspiring published novelist who is just finished working on a novel which he thinks will be a big success, but then it's been taken away by H&M customer services over it, and they take it away. So now he is struggling to try to find ways to make ends meet so that he can have a wedding, even if he has to scrimp and save throughout his life to make money. He does bring a sense of realism, a real sense of insecurity, and he's probably maybe the one who has the most cautious way of showing that, even though these guys are all very laid back in terms of their lifestyle, Adam definitely knows that this is not going to last forever and that he has to find ways to make money on his own. He'll go through hustling. He'll go through horse race betting. Hell, he even takes a job at Monomark's newspaper and eventually becomes a gossip columnist. Then we have Fenella Woolgar. She is Agatha Runcible. She is truly a scene stealer in this movie. She is a wild, out of control, over-the-top character. I think she also provides a great array of comic relief here, as she is just this out-of-control type of party goer, but unfortunately, due to a roadside accident, her partying days eventually come to a close as she ends up getting brain dead and has to spend the rest of her life rotting away in a mental institute. Then you also have Michael Sheen. He plays a character named Miles, just like Agatha. He's flashy, he's flamboyant, he's materialistic. He's also uh, he's also a homosexual. Um, to me, that's not a big deal, but when you look at the time period of this movie in the 1920s, homosexuality could almost spell persecution. So in order for it, so he's insecure that if word comes out to reveal that he is a homosexual, he fears that he will be persecuted. And so he is, although living a daring life as a party goer, he is also suffering the insecurities about his orientation. Next up we have is James McAvoy. He is Simon Balcairn. He is a deviant sneak who writes for Dan Ackroyd's newspaper publication. He goes by the name of Mr. Chatterbox, where he writes the latest gossip through these party goers. And this, of course, has proven a success to him and to Monomark. But then once word comes about that Simon Balcairn is Mr. Chatterbox, he is no longer invited into any more wild parties. And practically everywhere he goes, word catches on. He gets kicked out of places, and feeling that he is now jobless and that he's without hope, he ends up unfortunately committing suicide. Yes, it just goes to show you that the party life isn't without its share of ragtags and sneaks. And yes, like I said, wild parties and celebrations all the time does not always bring out the best in everyone. And in this case, it seemed to have a bit of an effect towards the three characters that I've just mentioned before, like Agatha, Miles, and Simon to most extent. Dan Ackroyd, of course, is the strict, stern newspaper owner. I forget the name of it, but anyhow, yeah. In this movie, he is not actually speaking with a British accent. In fact, he's just speaking in his regular Canadian voice. But still, he, of course, is very demanding that Adam should find a way to get his novel back. But then word comes along that that his Mr. Chatterbox killed himself eventually. Adam ends up getting a job at his newspaper and becomes the new Mr. Chatterbox. But then word comes around that he is Mr. Chatterbox. He eventually gets fired from his job due to a little snag. And Monomark, of course, is not exactly a very forgiving individual. Then you got Jim Broadbent as the major, who recommends him to do gambling and horse race betting and things like that. So yeah, that's his role. Next up we have is Stockard Channing. She is Mrs. Melrose Ape. She is a choir lady who is trying to preach out against the party goers because she thinks that these guys are all atheists and heathens. So she tries to spark some biblical religious stampings within these party goers. I mean, you can hear like her choir of angels all have very angelic voices, but I kind of understand what she's going through. She is this uber moral, uber religious type who feels that these guys are just living their lives in a heathenistic way. Just the way how she feels. Then you have David Tennant, who plays Ginger Littlejohn. He was, of course, the ex-boyfriend of Nina Blount, and he's trying to do everything he can to get back into her life, much to the chagrin of Adam. So there's a little bit of some bitter rivalry between Adam and Ginger. That plays out very, very effectively. And then finally we have Lawrence of Arabia himself, Peter O'Toole. He is, of course, playing the role of Colonel Blount. He is Nina's father, who offers him a large sum of money from a check, only to realize that the check that he signed was a fake one. Or maybe it was unintentional. Maybe the guy was senile. I don't know. I don't know the whole story about that part. But anyhow, yeah, he also seems to play a very small role. Not exactly high impact. Maybe even if he would have been edited out, we probably would not have missed him much because he's not on for very long. But I guess he is played for a little bit of some lighthearted comedy. So aside from this movie being drama, period piece, costume stuff, there is a lot of some light touches of humor. There's also, well, it is pretty dramatic, come to think of it. You know, knowing that most of the characters in this movie don't have happy endings with them. No, nobody really dies in this movie except for Simon McAvoy's character. He's the only one who dies, but he's not like shot or anything like that. No, he commits suicide when he puts his head inside a stove that's turned on. You know, he puts his head towards the stove and just smells the fumes. I guess it just got into his nostrils, which would eventually get into his lungs. And I think he died from deliberate asphyxiation, which could also be just a suicide. So there's really not too much in terms of intense scenes, but you know, it's very, very brief. But you know, the characters in this movie are definitely truly stuff you could get really invested into. And I think this movie really, really is good for those who love costume dramas, who love period piece films, those who love movies where the costumes are very vibrant. This is truly a very, very underrated movie, to tell you. It pretty much awards or accolades at the Oscars due to, I guess, its low budget. But still, it's very effectively played out. The characters are really good. The acting is very good. The quick pacing of this movie makes everything seem interesting. It's very colorful. There's a lot of great, vibrant characters. So I would truly highly recommend this movie. If I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would definitely give Bright Young Things a 7. 7.5. Let's give it a 7.5. If there was any flaws in this movie, I would probably say that the flaws come from the fact that the parties seem to be a little too frequent, the crowds of people seem to be a little too much, and sometimes you could get a bit lost in the shuffle here and there. But it doesn't really deter my expectations very much. And I really, truly think this movie might be something for everyone to enjoy. It's PG, it's lighthearted, its dramatic stuff is not like full-blown sentimentality, and its humor is more subtle and low-key. This is a very low-key, underrated movie that I highly recommend. So I guess this ends my rider review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And now we'll be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Kirut Ryder saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.